Let's just jump right into this. We usually think of history as this straightforward timeline, right? Great leaders, major wars, maybe a sudden technological breakthrough here and there. But welcome to this explainer, where we're going to unpack some absolutely brilliant work by Dr. Nimrod Israeli. He argues that there's actually a hidden architecture beneath all of that, a deeper structural logic that literally determines whether a society prospers or completely stagnates. So today, we're going to look right past those visible events of history to uncover the hidden frameworks that truly drive human progress.
You know, it's actually wild when you stop and think about it. Think about the core paradox of inheritance. A child born today arrives in a world that's already completely organized by universities, global corporations, complex financial systems, and insane technologies. They interact with these massive systems way before they even learn how to read, and obviously without having the slightest clue how to actually build them. Someone born in a remote village can move to a modern megacity and, in just a single lifetime, participate in economic systems that took humanity thousands of years to figure out. It turns out, explaining how that incredible leap is even possible changes how we view history entirely.
So what's the deal here? Well, we have to separate what you and I benefit from as individuals versus the absolute heavy lifting of capability building that civilizations have to do over millennia. You and I, we get to inherit. We just step into structures that already exist. But civilizations, they don't have that luxury. Before a society can actually benefit from a city, or a legal contract, or a university, it has to first create the underlying capabilities that make those structures possible to begin with. The stuff we take for granted today was literally unimaginable until the exact conditions required to sustain it were slowly, painstakingly built.
So to figure out how this massive inheritance gets built, here is our roadmap for this explainer. 1. The paradox of inheritance. 2. History's hidden engine. 3. A lesson from biology. 4. The steps of civilization. 5. The LLC era. And 6. Designing the future. All right, let's start with section 1, the paradox of inheritance. Inheritance versus creation. Dr. Israeli hits on something absolutely crucial here. He says, enabling structures expand what societies can sustain together. Meaning, history isn't just some random list of events where people suddenly wake up and decide, hey, let's build a city today, or let's form an empire. No, it's driven by the emergence of these hidden frameworks, what he calls enabling structures. These structures are the real secret sauce. They dramatically increase our capacity for complex, productive interdependence. They're basically the invisible scaffolding that allows humans to coordinate on a massive scale. Moving right along to section 2, history's hidden engine. Outcomes versus causes. This is where we all kind of have a blind spot, honestly. We look at history books and we mistake the visible outcomes for the underlying causes. We see the flashy stuff, the tribes, the sprawling cities, the huge empires. But the real drivers, they're the hidden enabling structures, things like language, agriculture, and institutions. Like the Roman Empire wasn't just built on swords and soldiers. It was built on the invention of complex legal contracts. New forms of society don't just pop up because people want them to. They only appear when societies develop the actual structural capacity to sustain them. Which brings us to section 3, a lesson from biology, emergence versus dominance. Okay, remember high school biology, mitochondria, the powerhouse of the cell? Well, they didn't just magically conjure up complex organisms overnight. Instead, they dramatically increased the energy capacity that was available to living cells. That was the brand new capability. And then, cells used this incredible new energy to specialize, to coordinate, and to actually become interdependent. Without that foundational enabling structure, that initial energy boost, the complex multicellular life that dominates our planet today simply could not exist. The capability always has to come first. But here's the really fascinating catch. Emergence is not the same thing as dominance. The ancestors of mitochondria appeared millions of years before complex multicellular life became the norm. And just like in biology, human civilizations generally can't leap forward to advanced states without first developing those foundational prerequisites. A new capability emerges, sure, but it can take centuries or even millennia for society to fully reorganize around it, and for that transformation to actually become visible. Let's look at how this plays out in section 4, the steps of civilization. Structural inheritance. As we track this across time, notice how each of these leaps acts exactly like mitochondria for human society. They just keep expanding the range of productive coordination we can handle. We move from the era of language back in prehistory, to agriculture millennia ago, to institutions centuries ago, right up to the modern era of the LLC.
Every single one of these wasn't just a clever new tool, it was a fundamental expansion of what human beings could accomplish together.
Take a look at this matrix, because it perfectly maps out how the capability always dictates the form. Language gave us shared memory, which manifested as the tribe. Agriculture gave us surplus, boom, we get villages. Expanding trade networks manifested as cities. Institutions allowed for durable, role-based coordination that could survive long after the founders died, and that manifested as massive empires and universities. And finally, the LLC gave us durable contractual coordination, which gives us the modern global corporations we see today.
This totally flips our normal cause and effect thinking on its head. Tribes didn't sit around a fire one day and invent language. The emergence of language expanded our coordination enough to make it tribe possible. Villages didn't invent agricultural surplus. Having a surplus is what allowed people to settle down and form villages. Cities didn't invent specialized labor. Expanding trade networks created a level of interdependence that made cities viable. The capability always precedes the visible social form. All right, let's talk about our current era in Section 5, the LLC era, global independence. I know when we hear LLC, or limited liability company, we instantly think of boring legal paperwork. But in the grand context of human history, it is a massive enabling structure, a real game changer. The true genius of the LLC is how it allows massive voluntary cooperation to persist through contracts. It distributes risk, ownership, and management so that people can cooperate without needing to know each other personally or be related by blood. It's literally the reason you can buy a smartphone that was built by tens of thousands of strangers across 5 different continents, all without a single dispute. The LLC expanded the scale of voluntary interdependence to a completely global level. It created modern supply chains and multinational enterprises. And honestly, it explains a huge mystery of global development. Why does similar technologies introduced in different countries yield totally different levels of prosperity? Well, because technology alone just isn't enough. The outcome depends almost entirely on the presence or absence of this structural capacity for coordination. A society absolutely needs the enabling structure, that framework for complex interdependence, to turn raw technology into sustained prosperity.
And that brings us to Section 6, Designing the Future, Social Expansion.
So the LLC successfully locked in large-scale economic interdependence. But look at the kibbutz in Israel. It's a fascinating prototype for social interdependence. It asks a pretty radical question. What happens when we use these highly developed structures to organize everyday social life and mutual reliance? Both systems allow huge numbers of individuals to participate in durable structures with shared rules, but the kibbutz really tests the waters of expanding this incredible human capacity well beyond just making money or strictly economic goals.
Which brings us to this massive takeaway from the source material. Production depends on technology. Sustained prosperity depends on structure. Prosperity isn't just hoarding natural resources or having the latest, shiniest tech. Prosperity is the visible outcome of a society's underlying capacity to organize complexity productively over time. When you get right down to it, it is all about how well we can sustain interdependence.
So keep in mind our lesson from biology and early history. The full impact of past enabling structures took centuries, sometimes millennia, to fully show themselves. The people living through the early days of those transitions couldn't possibly imagine the massive empires or global cities that would eventually result. Since the LLC is still a pretty recent innovation in the grand sweep of human history, ask yourself, what unimaginable future forms of human cooperation are our current structures quietly building the foundation for today? What future civilization is currently hiding in the architecture of our present?